I'm 34F and have been married to my husband James, 36M, for 8 years now. We've always lived a modest life, choosing to prioritize saving for our future rather than indulging in a luxurious lifestyle. James works as an engineer, and I'm a bakery owner, so after a lot of hard work, we've both built stable careers that allow us to live comfortably, though we're not wealthy by any means. Over the years, we've learned to live within our means, focusing on what really matters to us, building a strong relationship, planning for the future, and living responsibly. However, while James and I have worked to build this life, his family dynamics have always been a bit of a struggle, especially when it comes to his younger sister, Rachel, 32F. Rachel has always been a difficult person to deal with, to put it mildly. She's the youngest and the only daughter in the family, and she has always acted as if the world revolves around her. I don't like to speak ill of others, but in this case, I have to say it. Rachel is spoiled. Rachel married her husband Thomas, 38M, 3 years ago. Thomas comes from old money, and he works as an investment banker in New York City. They had been living in a luxury apartment in the city, but recently, they decided they wanted to buy a house. Of course, Rachel wanted nothing less than her dream home in an upscale neighborhood. But despite Thomas's family wealth, his parents have strict rules about earning your own way and refuse to help with the house purchase. So, Rachel and Thomas turned to my father-in-law, Phil, for financial help instead, and Phil, who has always been soft when it comes to Rachel, agreed to cover the down payment for them. That's how they managed to buy the house, but this whole situation sparked a series of events that ultimately blew up in a way none of us expected. Since the very beginning, Rachel has made it clear she doesn't like me, though I've never been able to understand why. Her dislike started with small, subtle digs about my background. I grew up in a hard-working immigrant family. My parents ran a small grocery store, and though we didn't have much, they made sure I had a good education and strong values. When my parents tragically passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, it was devastating. Yet even during this time, Rachel found ways to be cruel. She began to make more cutting comments about my humble upbringing, implying that I didn't belong in the same social circle as her or her husband. Rachel would say things like, "I guess people like you don't understand what it's like to have nice things," or, "I can see why James doesn't take you on expensive vacations. It's probably best not to spoil you." Every time she spoke, it felt like a jab at me and my parents, as if she were deliberately trying to undermine my self-worth. The worst part was that she seemed to take pleasure in it, as though her wealth and social status somehow gave her the right to belittle me. For a while, I tried to let her remarks roll off my back. I told myself that Rachel was insecure and was just acting out of jealousy or some other issue she had with herself, not me. But over time, her constant jabs started to wear on me. It wasn't just the things she said, it was the way she would bring up money and luxury as though those were the only things that mattered in life. For example, when she and Thomas first moved into their luxury apartment, she couldn't stop talking about the expensive designer furniture, the high-end artwork they'd purchased, or the fancy trips they took to Europe. It was clear that she thought material wealth was everything, and she wanted me to feel inferior. James has always been supportive of me, but dealing with Rachel has been tough for him, too. As her older brother, he feels a certain responsibility toward her, but even he has grown tired of her entitled behavior. He's had more than a few talks with her over the years, telling her that her comments were hurtful and unnecessary, but she just doesn't seem to care. To Rachel, I'm beneath her, and there's no changing her mind. Her attitude caused tension between us, but I didn't want to put James in a difficult position. I tried to handle things quietly, only bringing it up when it became unbearable. Things finally reached a boiling point at Rachel's housewarming party, which she threw shortly after moving into her new home. Of course, James and I were invited. I would have preferred not to go, but James felt we should go to keep the peace in the family. I reluctantly agreed, hoping that maybe now that Rachel had everything she wanted, a rich husband, a beautiful new home, and the financial support of our Phil, she might have calmed down and would finally stop treating me so poorly. When we arrived at the party, it was immediately clear that Rachel was the center of attention, basking in the admiration of her friends and showing off her new house. She led guests around on tour, pointing out all the fancy features like the custom marble countertops, top-of-the-line appliances, and the luxurious backyard pool. I tried to stay out of her way, making small talk with other guests and keeping to myself as much as possible. But throughout the evening, I could feel her eyes on me. I could tell she was waiting for the right moment to strike, and I should have known she had something nasty planned. Dinner was served buffet style, so I filled my plate and sat down at one of the long tables set up in the backyard. I was quietly eating when Rachel made her move. She walked to the head of the table, looking around with a smug expression, and then dropped her bombshell. "Oh, wait for the leftovers, just like your low-class parents taught you." The entire table went silent. I felt a sharp pain in my chest as her words hit me. I was humiliated and hurt, not just because she had insulted me, but because she had dragged my parents into it. They weren't there to defend themselves, and that made her comment even more painful. I was too shocked to respond. I just sat there, frozen, as Rachel looked around, clearly expecting the rest of the guests to laugh or join in on her mockery. But something unexpected happened. My father-in-law, who had been sitting at the far end of the table, stood up. Now, Phil has always been a quiet man. He doesn't involve himself in family drama, and he's never really taken sides in conflicts between his children. But this time, he had reached his breaking point. He looked directly at Rachel, his face stern, and told her that her behavior was unacceptable. He said that he had tolerated her bratty attitude for years, but this was too much. He told her that if she didn't start showing respect not just to me, but to everyone, she would find herself cut off, both financially and emotionally. Rachel was stunned. Her face turned red, and she tried to argue, but Phil wasn't having it. He reminded her that he had helped her buy this house because he believed she was ready to take on the responsibility, but her actions had proven otherwise. Phil told her that unless she apologized to me and changed her ways, she could forget about any further financial support. With that, he turned and walked away from the table, leaving Rachel standing there, speechless. The rest of the guests awkwardly excused themselves from the table, and James and I left soon after. I was still in shock over what had happened. I never expected Phil to stand up for me like that, especially not against Rachel. But I was incredibly grateful. It was the first time someone in James's family had publicly called Rachel out for her behavior. The days following the party were tense. Rachel was furious, not just with me, but with her father. The day after the party, she stormed over to her parents' house and demanded an apology from Phil, claiming that he had embarrassed her in front of her friends. What really upset her was the fact that her upper-class friends didn't know she had taken a loan from Phil to buy her house. Now, they all knew, and Rachel couldn't stand that. But Phil didn't back down. He stood by what he had said at the party and made it clear that Rachel's behavior was out of line. He told her again that unless she apologized and made amends, she could expect no more help from him, financially or otherwise. This wasn't just an empty threat. Phil had been helping Rachel and Thomas with their mortgage payments every month, and without that assistance, they would be in serious financial trouble. Despite Thomas's family wealth, they weren't willing to bail Rachel out, and without Phil's help, Rachel and Thomas would be forced to manage on their own. Rachel did not take this well. She blocked her parents on social media, stopped answering their calls, and distanced herself from the family. The tension in the family became palpable, but James and I tried to stay out of it as much as possible. We didn't hear from Rachel directly, but I knew this was far from over. Rachel wasn't the type to let something like this go easily. And I was right. After distancing herself from her parents, Rachel began spamming me with texts, accusing me of ruining her party and demanding that I apologize to her. She said that I should be the one begging for her forgiveness, not the other way around. It was bizarre. Somehow, in her mind, I was the one who had wronged her, even though she had humiliated me by insulting my parents in front of everyone. I was so overwhelmed by the whole situation that I considered apologizing, just to make the drama stop. But I also know that I am not in the wrong. So, Redditors, I could really use some advice. Am I wrong here? I don't think so, right? This whole situation has become so overwhelming that I need another perspective. Update 1. Hey Reddit, I wanted to give you all an update. Unfortunately, things have only gotten worse since my last post. You'd think after everything that went down at Rachel's housewarming party, she'd back off or, at the very least, lay low for a while. But no, if anything, she's doubled down, and now her husband Thomas is in on it too. It started with Rachel continuing to harass me with texts. She's been relentless, accusing me of ruining her party, destroying her relationship with her father, and basically turning the entire family against her. At first, I tried to ignore her, but it's hard when your phone is constantly buzzing with messages filled with insults and guilt trips. I even considered blocking her, but I didn't want to escalate things further or make it look like I was avoiding the situation. Then, Thomas started to get involved. He began calling James several times a day, trying to get him to fix this mess. At first, Thomas's calls were calm, asking James to help smooth things over between Rachel and her parents. But when James made it clear that he wasn't going to get involved, Thomas's tone shifted. He started hinting that James could benefit if he helped out, saying things like, if you help us sort this out, we can make sure you're taken care of too. It was obvious what he was implying: money. Thomas was trying to bribe James into siding with them, probably thinking that James could convince Phil to continue the mortgage payments and avoid cutting Rachel off. The whole thing was disgusting. It made me realize just how manipulative Thomas is. He and Rachel really are a perfect match, both thinking that everything in life can be fixed with money or by pushing people around. James, to his credit, wasn't having any of it. He told Thomas that he wasn't interested in whatever benefits he was offering and that this was an issue Rachel had created on her own. Thomas didn't take that well. He started getting more aggressive, calling James repeatedly and leaving angry voicemails when James stopped picking up. It's clear that Thomas is getting desperate, and that desperation is making him act irrationally. James is trying to keep calm about it, but I can see it's stressing him out. We just want to live our lives in peace, but Rachel and Thomas keep dragging us into their mess. If that wasn't enough, Rachel went back to her parents' house, trying to stir up more drama. She's still hoping they'll continue covering her mortgage payments, even though Phil made it clear that he was done helping her unless she apologized and changed her behavior. Apparently, Rachel thought she could bully her parents into giving in. She showed up unannounced, storming into their house, and started shouting at them, demanding they make things right by continuing to pay for the house. What James's mom told him later, Rachel was in full meltdown mode, screaming about how unfair it was and how she deserved their support. She even had the audacity to threaten them with a lawsuit, saying that if they didn't keep up with the payments, she'd take legal action to force them to. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so sad. I mean, who sues their own parents? The funniest part, though, is that Phil has a legal background. He worked as a lawyer before he retired, and Rachel clearly forgot that little detail. When she threatened him with a lawsuit, Phil calmly told her that she didn't have a leg to stand on. He pointed out that there was no written agreement that he had to pay for anything, and even if there had been, one of the conditions of his financial help was that Rachel show some respect and act responsibly. Since she had failed to meet those conditions, she had no case. Phil told her that if she really wanted to pursue this ridiculous lawsuit, she was welcome to try, but it would only backfire on her. Rachel didn't take that well. She screamed that her father was abandoning her and trying to ruin her life. She said that if her parents didn't continue to pay, she and Thomas would lose the house. It was clear that Rachel was terrified of losing the image she'd worked so hard to create, this life of luxury and privilege that she'd been showing off to everyone. But the truth is, without her parents' help, she and Thomas are in serious financial trouble. Thomas's family wealth isn't going to bail them out, and neither of them seems capable of managing their finances on their own. Phil stood firm, though. He told Rachel that she needed to take responsibility for her own actions and that until she apologized to me and changed her attitude, she wouldn't be getting another cent from him. He was done with her manipulations and tantrums. Rachel, of course, stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Since then, Rachel has been on a warpath. She's still blocked her parents on social media, and now she's telling anyone who will listen that her father is ruining her life and that I'm the one who turned him against her. She's painted herself as the victim in this whole situation, conveniently ignoring all the hurtful things she's said and done. At this point, James and I are just trying to stay out of it as much as possible, but it's hard when they keep pulling us back in. Rachel's texts have become even more vicious, and Thomas is still calling James every day, trying to manipulate him into taking their side. It feels like we're in the middle of a storm that just won't end. So yeah, that's where we are now. Rachel is still causing chaos, Thomas is being manipulative, and we're just trying to maintain our sanity. I have no idea how this is going to play out, but I'm hoping that at some point, Rachel will realize that she can't always get her way by bullying and manipulating people. Until then, we're just taking things one day at a time. Any advice on how to handle this mess would be appreciated. It's exhausting, and we're not sure what to do next. Update 2. Hi again, everyone. Thank you so much for all the support and advice after my last update. Things have gotten even crazier, and we recently found out some news that has completely changed the situation with Rachel and Thomas. I'll try to explain everything as clearly as I can, but I'm still processing all of this myself. James and I decided it was time to visit his parents. We hadn't been over there since the whole debacle at Rachel's housewarming party, and while we'd been in touch over the phone, we felt like a face-to-face conversation was long overdue. The tension in the family has made it hard for us all to talk like we used to, and we missed them. Plus, we were curious to hear how things were going on their end with Rachel after she tried to bully them into paying her mortgage. When we arrived at my in-laws' house, it was clear that they were relieved to see us. My Mill gave me a long hug, and my Phil looked more tired than I'd ever seen him. They'd been dealing with so much stress, and it was heartbreaking to see how worn down they both were. But after some small talk and catching up, they told us something that shook us. Apparently, things between Rachel and Thomas have taken a serious nosedive. We knew they were struggling financially after James's father stopped helping them with the mortgage, but we didn't realize how bad it had gotten. My in-laws told us that Rachel and Thomas have been borrowing money from people all over town, friends, acquaintances, and even some of their wealthier neighbors. And it wasn't just small amounts either. Rachel had managed to fool a lot of people with her luxury lifestyle act, convincing them that she and Thomas just needed short-term loans to tide them over until some big investment deals came through. It turns out that most of those big deals were complete lies. Rachel and Thomas had been using the money to keep up appearances, paying for their extravagant lifestyle, hosting lavish dinners, and making sure they could still show off their new house. But now, people are starting to realize they've been duped. Over the past few weeks, more and more of Rachel's friends have come forward, saying that she and Thomas owe them thousands of dollars. And it's not just a few friends here and there, it's a lot of people. One of Rachel's closest friends, someone she's known for years, finally confronted her about the money she was owed, and Rachel basically shut her out. This friend reached out to James's parents, telling them everything, and from what we gathered, Rachel's been avoiding her, dodging calls, and pretending nothing was wrong. My in-laws were horrified, and rightly so. They didn't raise Rachel to behave like this, but it seems like her entitlement has spiraled so far out of control that she doesn't even care about burning bridges with people who used to be close to her. But the situation with Thomas is even worse. We found out that Thomas has been borrowing money from some of his old friends as well, people from his more affluent circles. These aren't your average people lending a few $100. We're talking about very wealthy individuals who've lent him significant amounts of money, trusting that he'd pay it back given his family's old money background. But now, these friends are getting fed up with his excuses. They've started demanding their money back, and instead of handling it maturely, Thomas has been lashing out. There was one particular incident that my in-laws told us about that shocked me to my core. Apparently, Thomas had been avoiding one of his wealthier friends who had loaned him a large sum of money. This friend had tried to approach Thomas at a social gathering to talk about it politely, but instead of apologizing or explaining the situation, Thomas completely lost it. He became aggressive, shouting at his friend in front of everyone, and even shoved him during the argument. It got so bad that the host of the event had to intervene to calm things down. But here's where it gets even more serious. This friend that Thomas attacked isn't just some random rich guy, he's extremely well connected, with ties to some very powerful families in the area. As a result of Thomas's outburst, this man has now filed a restraining order against him, and there's talk that if Thomas doesn't pay him back soon, he could be facing a lawsuit. We're talking about some serious legal consequences here, and from what we've heard, several other people in their circle are considering taking similar action against Thomas if they don't get their money back soon. It's insane to think that Thomas could have handled this so poorly. Instead of owning up to their mistakes and trying to make things right, both he and Rachel have been doubling down, pretending that they're the victims in all of this. Thomas seems to believe that because of his family's status, he's untouchable, but clearly, that's not the case. People are starting to see through their act, and the consequences are piling up fast. After hearing all of this, James and I were in complete shock. We knew Rachel and Thomas were in over their heads financially, but we had no idea it had reached this level of chaos. My in-laws are devastated. They never expected Rachel to get herself into this kind of trouble, and now they're worried that she could drag the entire family's name through the mud if this escalates any further. What's even worse is that Rachel has been continuing to harass my in-laws, despite everything. She showed up at their house again recently, demanding that they help her and Thomas out of this mess. She was screaming at them, accusing them of abandoning her and leaving her to deal with all of this alone. It's like she's completely disconnected from reality. She refuses to take any responsibility for the situation she's created. My Phil told her, once again, that he wasn't going to give her any more money until she changed her behavior, but that just sent her into an even bigger tantrum. She left in a fury, swearing that she'd never forgive them for betraying her. It's heartbreaking to watch this unfold, especially for James, who still loves his sister despite everything. He's been trying to reach out to Rachel, but she won't even respond to him anymore. It's like she's cut off everyone who won't give her what she wants, and she's doubling down on her bad decisions. Thomas is in just as deep, and it seems like they're spiraling further into trouble with each passing day. As for us, we're doing our best to stay out of the drama, but it's hard when it feels like the whole situation is about to implode. Between the restraining orders, the looming lawsuits, and the financial chaos, I don't know how Rachel and Thomas are going to dig themselves out of this hole. My in-laws are heartbroken, and I'm worried that things are going to get even worse before they get better. I'll keep you all updated as things develop, but right now, we're just trying to take things one day at a time. This whole situation feels like it's spiraling out of control, and I don't know how it's going to end. Thanks again for all the support. You've been a lifeline through this mess. Update 3. Hi everyone. A lot has happened since my last update, and I can hardly believe where things stand now. It feels like this whole situation has turned into something I never imagined possible. To those who have been following along and offering your thoughts, thank you so much. Your advice and support have meant the world to me. So, first of all, remember how I mentioned that Rachel and Thomas were in serious trouble because people were considering filing lawsuits against them? Well, that's exactly what happened. Things escalated quickly, and both Rachel and Thomas now find themselves tangled up in legal battles. It started with Thomas's wealthy friends, the ones he had borrowed large sums of money from, and then either ignored or lashed out at when they asked for it back. One of the most prominent families in their circle filed a lawsuit against him, demanding immediate repayment of the money he owed, along with damages for the way he had treated them. It turns out that Thomas had been using his connections to borrow money not just for the house, but also to maintain a lifestyle that was completely beyond his means. When that lawsuit was filed, it triggered a chain reaction. Other people in their wealthy social circle followed suit, realizing they had been duped in the same way. Now, Thomas is facing multiple lawsuits, all from individuals who want their money back, and they're not small amounts. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it doesn't stop there. Rachel's friends have now also filed lawsuits against both her and Thomas. These are people she's known for years, friends who trusted her enough to lend her money when she claimed she was just going through a rough patch. Many of them have come forward, admitting that Rachel had manipulated them into thinking she was still living the high life, even when everything was crumbling around her. They were appalled when they found out the truth, especially after realizing that Rachel and Thomas had no intention of paying them back. The worst part? Rachel apparently tried to play the victim, telling her friends that she was the one being abandoned by everyone and that she needed help, but no one was falling for her act anymore. Now, they're both up to their necks in lawsuits. It's a mess, and I honestly don't know how they're going to handle it. Thomas, being the arrogant fool that he is, still hasn't learned a thing. You'd think that after facing this level of legal trouble, he'd realize the severity of his actions, but no, he's still trying to manipulate his way out. Believe it or not, Thomas had the nerve to text my husband again. He actually tried to bribe James, saying that if James would help smooth things over with his father, meaning convince Phil to bail them out again, Thomas would make it worth his while. Can you believe that? Even with everything crashing down around him, he's still trying to buy his way out of trouble with empty promises. James, of course, ignored him. It's almost funny how desperate and out of touch Thomas is. But here's where things get even stranger. While Thomas is digging himself deeper into this hole, it seems like Rachel has finally come to her senses, at least partially. Over the past week or so, she's been texting me, apologizing for everything that happened. At first, I wasn't even sure it was her because she'd been using different numbers to contact me. She's blocked on my main phone, so she's resorted to messaging me from random numbers, each time with a new apology. She's been saying that she regrets the way she treated me, that she was wrong to insult my parents, and that she realizes now how much she hurt me. But no one is buying this anymore, especially me, after everything she put me through. James's parents are definitely disappointed in Rachel, but at this point, they've accepted that there's only so much they can do. They've tried to help her, they've given her opportunities to turn her life around, but she squandered all of it. Phil, in particular, has told us that he believes this is just karma. As much as it hurts him to see his daughter in this mess, he also knows that she's reaping the consequences of her own actions. Both he and Mill have come to terms with the fact that Rachel and Thomas need to learn their lessons the hard way. They've been clear that they won't be stepping in to save her this time. It's sad to see it come to this, but it's also necessary for Rachel to understand that she can't keep taking advantage of people and expect to get away with it. As for me and James, we've been trying to distance ourselves from the chaos as much as possible. It hasn't been easy, but we're focusing on our own lives, and we're grateful that we didn't get pulled further into their mess. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who reminded me not to give in and apologize to Rachel. Looking back, I'm so glad I stood my ground. It's clear now that apologizing would have only enabled her behavior, and I'm proud that I didn't let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for something that wasn't my fault. Rachel and Thomas are facing the consequences of their own choices, and while it's painful to watch from the sidelines, it's not my responsibility to fix their mistakes.